Marshville, which is Richmond County, and we live here in Scotland County. The mandate is called Leave the Trail, and today I'll discuss an overview of the migration down the 74 East. The left side that were free people of color, and then how the family continued to preserve all these years. So starting on marriage, they were married on April 6, 1940, at 19 and 20 years old in present day Marlboro County. Yeah, everybody, I think, well, Scotland County had just formed, and so the majority of the black people had to go to Marlboro County to get all their stuff done, death certificates, marriage certificates, anything related to completing the household.
So that's grandma and granddaddy?
Yes, that's their all the documents are their actual documents that were listed in the census.
We're gonna have Q&A.
Question that.
Oh, okay. This is a copy of the U.S. Census. I took the pictures from the Facebook group. It shows Aunt May when she was 7 years old, my grandmother at 3 years old, Aunt Nada at 1. They were respectively 28 and 30 years old, the majority of the kids born. Uncle Reggie was 12 and Uncle Robert was 14.
What year?
I don't remember what it says. So a little bit about Granddad. He was born May 26, 1918. I think the story really turns when I found his death certificate. It shows his biological parents, which his father's name was Thomas Walker, and his mother's name was Cornelius Hawkins. And so it really threw me for a track because I was following the Deberry path all the way down from Anson County, but the death certificate unlocked a whole lot. He was known in the community as Tom Bogan. That's where the Tom Bogan name comes from. But he actually lived with a lady named Annie Bogan and her husband Eli Deberry. That's where the name Deberry comes from, the name Eli. So early in the 1926s, our family, like most families, really settled on that 74 East corridor, which is Anson, Richmond, and which is now present day Scotland County. Everybody moved, all the families moved on this corridor because that's what was happening in the region from an agricultural standpoint and just what was happening in the transformation of times. One thing that also stood out to me was the way he died. He died from respiratory arrest and pneumonia and a brain syndrome. So that says a lot about just kind of his thought process during that time.
Hey, what was his carpet?
Thomas. No, it's not. Walker. You got a question?
No.
So a little bit about Thomas. Again, this is the marriage from Eli and Annie. One interesting thing about Annie and Eli, they actually lived together for a long time. They got married when Eli was 45. There are census records that show that Thomas and Uncle Walter were in the family at around 2 years old. But it was listed as a grandson. And back then, that was the way to keep the families together by listing him as grandson. Son-in-law shows up at 14 years old as a son-in-law in the same census. So a little bit about what is now present Williamson and Laurel Hill Township. One interesting thing about his birth parents, neither one of them were raised in a singular line family, which means they come from a traditional mother and father. Thomas Walker, they came together in 1917. Thomas Walker was 22, Cornelia was 21. They looked based on census records in the birth certificate. They only looked like they were together for about a year, because 2 years later, the mom, Cornelia, is in another census with her family, her parents, but she's listed as a stepdaughter in that household. Thomas is remarried 2 years later with 2 kids, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And there's no more knowledge of where he's at in terms of family in Thomas, our grandfather's life at that time. And then that's when at 2 years old, he begins to show up in Eli and Annie's household. Again, the Deberry lineages, again, Wadsboro, Rockham, you're going to hear constant themes because, again, we're on the 74 corridor. And what I found most fascinating was really grandmother's side. This is her actual birth certificate. And so while the Deberry Bogan line represents a narrative rapid movement across the survival lines. One interesting thing about the Deberry, right after slavery, the Deberry family in Anson County, they had 160 acres of land. So to be able to come right out of slavery with land shows the resilience of just the Deberry family line.
Coincidentally, who was in that picture with Grandma? Who was in that picture with Grandma? You?
Oh.
That's like
But this is another census record hearing. The entire Medlin family were free people of color, meaning they were never in slavery. They never had a master. They was always reading and writing. Our family really merged with two of the most dynasty families in North Carolina, and particularly this region. The Deberry, the white Deberry really mean they were a very powerful slave family in Unionville, Anson County area, but the Medlins were always free people of color. All the census records listed everyone in the family as being able to read and write. And again, having that ability right after slavery, during slavery is a big accomplishment for the family. On August 2nd, 1908, Henry was 22. He married Eliza, which was 19 years old, who was the daughter of Fannie Davis and Danny Davis, locking together two of the most powerful bloodlines in Union County. If you see these names that we have in our family, they're all kind of recycled names. These are names that was early 1800s, pre-1900s. Henry and Fannie eventually moved to what is right side of Marshville, so if you're going through like Wingate, that's that area. Alongside grandmother stood her brothers, David, Benny, Herbert, Henry, Olander, James, Aunt Vestine, and Rose. Aunt Vestine also got married in Marlboro County and moved to what is present day Hope Mills. I didn't find too much on Rose McKeechin. I think Uncle David or Uncle Henry just passed away 3 years ago in 2022. He lived in Maryland. He was the baby brother. And that's the sisters were all the siblings. Again, just a high level, we went from Union County to Marshville, that's the Medlin Davis line. Anson County, Waynesboro, that's the Deberry line. One also thing I found interesting, so Granddaddy lived with Eli and Annie up until he was about 16 years old, 17 years old. There's a break, and as soon as he meets Grandma, he moves in with the Medlins.
That's right.
He's in the room over his head.
You can see at that time, which also was cool, was Uncle Reg and Uncle Robert were respectively 4 and 1 at the time, I think. And they were written at the house to some guys from Texas that showed it from the census record as well. And then this is Annie and Eli's census, and you can see where he's listed as son-in-law, but he's around 14, 15 years old at that time as a son-in-law. We have James, we have Uncle Walter Bogan. I think the Bogans came from Annie's side of the family. That's where Tom Bogan comes from. Kind of the last few slides, the family legacy stands firmly on two distinct foundations of Southern resilience. The sharp adaptive survival of the Deberry, Bogan, Walker, Hopkins line, deep-rooted literary stability of the Medlin Davis line. Both families emerged in the late 1800s, self-aware architects of their own destiny, commanding their own names and narratives. Really, Annie's identity as a Bogan unlocks the true heart of the 1920s household. Her home with Eli Deberry was a deliberate maternal home to gather, protect, and shelter all the Bogan kids. It took about 5 or 6 Bogan kids into their home at that time. I'm not sure if they were Annie's nieces, nephews. I don't think they were her kids. I think she took in her siblings' kids to raise. Ultimately, the multi-generation migration was happening when Thomas Alexander and Annie Zell joined forces, preventing a child around 8 kids. And that's where we are in the Deberry family reunion. And I'll just end with this. I began this work for myself to understand identity through family, memory, and history. Along the way, I realized how much story exists beyond what one person can capture. This is my contribution from that process. I share it with gratitude for those who came before and respect for the fact that no single document can hold it all.
Now you ask your question.
I ain't got no question. At least I know where my middle name is.
interesting fact. I think the most interesting fact that
Just wait, it's okay.
the
Sit
Medlins
down.
were just free people of color, and not knowing that. I think we spent a lot of time on the Deberry side and didn't really understand and look at the Medlin side. And as I began to unpack just the history on that side, just there were not many families in North Carolina, particularly on 74, that were literate, that could read. Every census that I looked at the Medlin side, everybody in the house could read. They had tenants that lived with them that showed me that they owned their own property, was able to keep the structure together. I think it's just a cosmos of what our family does now, from taking each other in. We may have gotten away from that, but our early orders that if something happened to one, we just migrated into the family, and it wasn't a disturbance. It didn't cause anyone to be mad. It just Annie took in 5 or 6 kids of hers that were not hers and moved them around strategically. And just the way Granddaddy died,
Cam.
Granddaddy life, the way he died affected me. I think for me, learning the whole ceremony, you don't understand the argument. I think it was just one of the things why all the issues were hard to take.
I think grandma, they did what you just said about taking in family. Because what I've learned at Dennis and Jane Henry, they weren't going to Washington D.C. They wasn't leaving North Carolina. They wasn't leaving North Carolina to go up north and go to school. They kept them here. And we all grew up as brothers. He was first cousin. We grew up as brothers. And that keeping everybody in touch. To what you said, I think we have gotten away from that. I don't know why. So, they come from.
Hey, you said granddaddy met grandma and then he moved in with her?
That's all you got, man. That's all you got.
Granddaddy.
It was really fast. It was really fast as soon as
That's something good to share with, like whenever we do get back with our Medlin family, side of the family.
Yes.
That's some good information to share with them about none of us ever being enslaved. Yeah.
And we wanted a copy of that, cause you got it.
I'll put it on.
Share it on the page. Share it on the page.
I'll put it in a link that you just put on.
You can put it on there.
I don't think you should put it on the page.